How's it going, everyone? This is Paul Garcia, ProjectSpurs.com, bringing you a quick recap of the San Antonio Spurs' loss to the New Orleans Pelicans at home in San Antonio. Let's first begin with before tip-off. What was the situation for both teams entering this game? So the Pelicans were favored by 5.5. Josh Richardson was out with a right ankle soreness. Zach Collins, even though, yes, we knew he was out already with the left fibula non-displaced head fracture, we do want to note that he was almost close to coming back. He's going to be coming back pretty soon because initially the Spurs didn't list him as out right until the day of game day that they had to say that he was officially out. But again, Zach Collins is getting closer. He has been out for quite a while now with that injury. And then just before tip-off, CJ McCollum, the Pelicans announced, was going to be out with a non-COVID illness. And then also one of their better shooters in New Orleans, Trey Murphy III, he was also out due to injury. So that was your situation for the game before tip-off for both teams. And for the San Antonio Spurs, this was another tough night for San Antonio. Their 6-game losing streak was extended. Their losing streak, should I say, was extended to 6 games. It wasn't a blowout loss for San Antonio, but it also wasn't a close game for them most of the night. It was pretty much New Orleans. I would say it's a comfortable win for New Orleans. They kind of kept distance from San Antonio, and it never really became a close game for either for San Antonio to get within reaching distance of New Orleans. New Orleans had a pretty comfortable lead, as you can see here by their sizable leads. So let's do a quick recap. We knew this was going to be a struggling night for San Antonio. Just by the way, they started the first quarter. New Orleans started off with a 9-0 run against San Antonio, so they're up by 12 midway through the first. By the end of the first quarter, San Antonio's only down by 10. Doug McDermott had a strong offensive game right out of the gates with 11 points off the bench in that first quarter. In the second quarter, you see that the Pelicans' lead ballooned up to 20 midway through the quarter. And then Devin Vassell gets kind of hot there in the last 6 minutes of that second quarter, and he goes into halftime with 14 points. But the Spurs are down by 19 points at halftime. Third quarter, New Orleans maintains their lead by 19 points midway through the third quarter. Then by the end of the third, Devin has 24 points and Doug McDermott has 21 points. The only two players playing very well for San Antonio scoring the ball. But again, the Pelicans still have a 19-point lead. And then the fourth quarter comes and it's pretty much over. The Pelicans extend their lead up to 27 points at one point midway through the through the fourth quarter. Doug McDermott, it looked like he got injured. It looked like an ankle injury according to the broadcast, and he never returned to the game. And then Coach Pop kind of put in the end of the bench players like Gorgie Jang, Jordan Hall entered there, in the last 6 minutes of the quarter. And the Spurs ended up losing that game by 19 points. One thing we do want to note is that Keldon Johnson got pulled pretty early from the third quarter, looked more so like a coaching decision, and then he never returned for the rest of the second half. And so, and you're going to see this in the numbers as we go through them here. So your leading scorers for the game for San Antonio was Devin Vassell, who ends up with 26 points to lead the Spurs, 12 points from the three-point line. Doug McDermott, like I said, had a good 1 through 3 quarters before he got hurt in the fourth with 21 points, 10 points in the paint, and 9 points from the three-point line. Jeremy Sohan ends up with 12 points, 10 points in the paint. He had a nice alley-oop finish from off a pass from Jakob Poeltl, where he finishes with the dunk, and then Bates-Diop off the bench with 10 points, 6 points in the paint, 4 points from the free throw line. You see there that the Spurs, the only area that they won on the floor against New Orleans was the mid-range, which they won by 12. But again, that's not an area that you want to win in today's NBA. And then for the Pelicans, they had several players who played well, but really Zion. Zion was just, he just was dominant in the paint with 28 of his 32 points there. He ended up scoring a new season high, but his career high is 39. Jonas Valanciunas had a good game inside and outscored. He made 4 3 balls. He also scored well in the paint against San Antonio. Devontae Graham was hitting threes all night, 18 of his 21 points to the three-point line. Brandon Ingram had a quiet first half, but then in the second half, he kind of got his game going, and he ended up scoring from all 3 levels. And then you see here, New Orleans won the paint by 16 points. They won the three-point line by 12 points, and then they also barely won the free throw line. But again, that was the Pelicans' leading scorers. For the Spurs, some of their standout players, we do want to note Devin there with 26 points, a career high 8 assists. So before that 8 assists tonight, it was 7 assists where it was his career high. So he tops out as the best player for San Antonio on the floor tonight. Trey Jones with 9 points and 9 assists for San Antonio. Doug McDermott, like I said, 21 points off the bench before he got hurt. Bates-Diop with 10 points and 5 rebounds. And then Jakob Poeltl, even though he had a tough night scoring the ball, 4 points, he did end up with 14 rebounds and 3 assists, but he also had the 5 turnovers. And again, we do want to note that Keldon had, again, he didn't play much because, like I said, he had an early turnover in the third quarter. Coach Pop pulled him, and then he really didn't insert him back into the game. So that was more so of a coaching decision by the coaching staff. And Keldon ends up with 5 points, which I believe is a season low, 1 turnover, 1 rebound, and 1 foul there in just 16 minutes of play. And so those were some of these standout players from the Spurs. Like I said, I don't want to go too deep into stats because this was really never a close game, but it also wasn't a huge blowout for New Orleans. Let's at least take a look at the shooting stats though for both teams. New Orleans had a good night shooting the ball. 57% of their shots they made overall. They had a great night in the paint. 52% of their shots in the paint, and they made 72% of them. They also had a great night shooting the three ball. 42% from three. 40% of their attempts came from there. For the Spurs, this trend just continues for them. They're continuing to have difficulty making the 3-point shot. That shot has really gone away from this team. They made just 29% of their attempts tonight. 40% of their shots were from three, but again, they weren't making them very well. They had a good night scoring in the paint. They just didn't get there enough to attack the Pelicans' defense. And then they had a good night shooting from the mid-range, 53% accuracy. But again, when you're winning the mid-range battle, that's not a great thing in today's NBA with so much dominant outside shooting. As far as the breaks, the Spurs win that area by 6 points. And then on the points off turnovers, that was the Pelicans' area. Let's go to some notable records for San Antonio. Now that they're in the midst of the 6-game losing streak, they are now 0-11 when losing the three-point line. So again, like I mentioned multiple times in these videos and also on the Spurs cast, that three-point line is crucial for the Spurs. And when they're not winning it, you're seeing all these losses mount up for them. And then also they just haven't been able to make that comeback fully. When they're down by double digits, they're now 0-12. And this is notable that this is now the 4th game where they've trailed by 18 or more points, San Antonio. All right, so where do the Spurs stand overall through 19 games? They are now 6-13 overall. Well, what's surprising here is that considering all these losing streaks, they don't have a worse record than the Los Angeles Lakers. They're still 13th out west, ahead of the Lakers barely. They are 3-6 at home. They are 2-11 versus the West, and they are on a 6-game losing streak, which is now officially their longest losing streak of the season. And who do they have up next to finish out this Thanksgiving week? They play the Lakers on Friday, and then they also play the Lakers on Saturday. Both games will be in San Antonio, and that will close out the week for San Antonio. By that point, we'll have a 21-game sample size of what the Spurs team looks like. So, from everyone at Project Spurs, we want to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy that break, and then the Spurs will be back over the weekend. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia. Have a great evening.